Hey, good morning, sunshine. Welcome to day one of e-learning. Can I get a woot woot? Hey, when I left you on Friday the 13th, I was going to have you do this newscast project over the civil rights era. We're going to have to scrap that, and we're just going to go old school where I'm just presenting the lesson to you like we're sitting in class together going through the sway. The sway is published, so that's always there for you to reference if you need to. All right, let's jump right in. We got our buddy here, Plessy, Homer Plessy. The year is 1896, and this guy gets on the railway car and he's like, I'm not getting off. And they're like, but you need to. He's like, I'm not going to. But looking at this guy, we wonder why he had to get off the rail car. Well, we need to go back to our first semester knowledge and remember the one drop rule, which said, I pause for your answer. Yes, if you have one drop of black blood, then you are considered black. Homer Plessy here was 7/8 white. He had one drop of black blood. He wasn't ashamed of his ethnicity. He was proud of it. That's why he refused to get off the railway car. But here's the thing that you need to know about this court case. It went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and they said segregation is okay. The ruling in the correct words is separate but equal. And that meant that America could segregate water fountains, segregate restaurants, segregate hotels, segregate schooling. And we know it wasn't equal, but it was definitely separate. And segregation went on from 1896 all the way to 1954 and thereafter. But we're going to have another court case come in that will end the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling. Okay. And that court case was Brown versus Board of Education. And you see this little girl right here? Her name is Linda Brown. She was a third grader, and her parents sent her to school in her neighborhood. The neighborhood school said, yeah, this isn't your school. Your school is all the way across town. That's the one we're going to need you to go to. And her parents said no. Ended up suing the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas, and they won. What that meant is segregation is now illegal in schools in the United States of America. This was a ginormical ruling because it got rid of the 1896 ruling of separate but equal. Now, is this going to open up a whole new box of violence and hatred in America? Absolutely. It's a very sad time period. And you're going to see the giant form and get what they wanted and what they deserved. So here's the newscast or the newspaper headline from that time period. The United States Supreme Court voted 9-0 in favor of desegregating schools. So that's pretty incredible. All right. Rosa Parks is going to be our next one, our next freedom fighter here. She was a seamstress from Montgomery, Alabama. It's the end of the day. She says, I'm going to go home. I'm going to get on the bus. Now, you got to know the bus setup at this time was the whites could sit in the front, the blacks sat in the back. The blacks could also sit in the middle if there weren't very many whites on the bus. So Rosa gets on the bus. She sits one row in front of the black section. Bus driver gets up and asks 3 people, including herself, to move because there is a white man on the bus that needs a seat. She refuses. She's arrested, has to pay a $10 fine. The NAACP comes in and confronts her and says, we'd like to use your case. Because you got to realize they just got rid of segregation in schooling. Let's get rid of segregation on public transportation. And she says, if you think it will mean something to Montgomery and do some good, I'll be happy to go along with it. And again, this isn't going to be an easy fight. It isn't just because the United States Supreme Court says desegregate, then everybody's going to desegregate. No. They're going to find ways around it to make it very, very difficult. The hatred and the hurt is just astronomical during this time period. And it's going to take much longer after a Supreme Court ruling to really, truly desegregate. That's going to lead us into the Montgomery bus boycott. These lasted, initially, it was only supposed to last a day. And on December 5th, they asked the Black people of Montgomery, said, please don't ride the bus. We want to hurt them in the pocketbook. You hurt people financially and they listen. 90% of the Black people in Montgomery did not ride the bus that day. They ended up getting a leader to organize these boycotts, and it was Martin Luther King Jr. And after the success of the first boycott, he said, let's just keep going. Let's do this. Let's just do it. For almost over a year, almost 13 months, they boycotted the buses. Now, it wasn't easy. Here's some things that happened. The Black people were carpooling. They walked, they rode bicycles, they used horse-drawn buggies to get to work and school. But see, this is the giant coming together. It's incredible. The Black taxi drivers lowered their fares to 10 cents, which was the same amount it took to ride the bus. But see, people get angry when they get hurt in the pocketbook. And so Black taxi drivers were being fined if they were not charging at least 45 cents for a ride. They end up arresting Martin Luther King, charging him $500. He has to spend 2 weeks in jail. While he is in jail, his house is firebombed, as well as several Black churches within the area. But even through all that violent attack against the Black people, Martin Luther King rises up and he says, we must love our white brothers no matter what they do to us. So Martin Luther King was definitely a peaceful protest advocate. In the end, Rosa Parks not getting up from that bus led to another court case, which led to the ruling of segregation on transportation is unconstitutional. And again, desegregation on the public transportation did not happen overnight. But again, Martin Luther King says, now let us say that we are not here advocating violence. The only weapon that we have in our hands this evening is the weapon of protest. If we were incarcerated behind the iron curtains of a communistic nation, we couldn't do this. If we were trapped in the dungeon of a totalitarian regime, we couldn't do this. The great glory of American democracy is the right to protest for right. What amendment gives you the right to peacefully protest? Yes, the First Amendment does. And that's for everybody. But they're going to do it peacefully. Now, this one's really interesting because, like I said, not everybody was going to be like, oh, okay, so the United States Supreme Court says I have to do it, I will do it. No, they fought it and found ways around it. And an example of that is Crisis in Little Rock. It's the Central Nine. And so Eisenhower is the president at this time, and he would not publicly endorse Brown versus Education. And he says, I don't believe you can change the hearts of men with laws or decisions. And man, that had some deep meaning behind it because it was true. Okay? Just because the Supreme Court says so isn't going to make people just overnight go, okay, you can come to our school. We're going to fight it. So Eisenhower, though, knew he had to follow the federal government. And so he sends troops to Little Rock, Central High School in Little Rock, to protect 9 students that were allowed to go to this school. So here's the school right here. This is Central High School in Little Rock. And 9 students are going to go to this school. And guess who's going to be really ticked off about it? Yeah, the governor is. This guy right here, We'll say it fast and with an accent. Governor Orval E. Faubus. Take it in, take it in. And so he gets the National Guard of Arkansas to prevent 9 Black students from entering the school. He's breaking federal government policy at this point. And they surround the school. And you have this angry white mob that's there to intimidate 9 Black students from entering. And so Eisenhower knew he could not let Faubus defy the federal government. He just knew it. He could not let that happen. And so they meet. Faubus is not very happy, but he removes the troops. But he does nothing to stop the anger that has been growing at that school. And so he just leaves. He leaves basically these 9 students to the angry white mob. Oh, that's leadership. And so you have these riots where 2 Black reporters were beaten and windows were broken on the school. Not sure how that's leadership. So Eisenhower immediately sends the U.S. Army to Little Rock. So these 9 students can be protected as they enter Central High School. By nightfall, more than 1,000 soldiers had arrived. And by 5 a.m., the troops had encircled the schools, bayonet ready for 9 students to enter. These African-American students arrived in an Army station wagon and walked into the school. Federal law has now been upheld because in 1954, they were supposed to desegregate. Troops had to stay at that school for the rest of the year. It's crazy. I mean, look at this image right here. I mean, you can just see the anger. And change is hard. Change was very difficult in the 50s and the 60s. All right, so the next thing here is the sit-in movement. I thought this was pretty cool. So we're in 1960 now, and we've got 4 guys in North Carolina that are going to do a sit-in at a restaurant. And so they sat at a whites-only lunch counter and ordered coffee. They're refused. And Blair says, "I beg your pardon, but you just served us at the checkout counter. Why can't we be served at the counter here?" And they stayed there until the restaurant closed. And they said that they're going to sit there every single day thereafter until they get the same treatment as a white customer. And every day another boy would leave. He says, "I just felt I had powers within me, a superhuman strength that would come forward. I probably felt better that day than I've ever felt in my life." And so what needs to happen now is they need to become that giant. So by the end of the week, they had 300 people at the sit-in. 2 months later, sit-ins had gone to 54 cities in 9 states. And they're staging them in hotels, restaurants, theaters, stores. By 1961, the sit-ins were held in more than 100 cities, the giant's getting bigger. However, at these sit-ins, they were heckled, punched, kicked, beaten with clubs, and burned with cigarettes, hot coffee, and acid. And most did not fight back. Peaceful protest, First Amendment. This picture pretty much says it all. I mean, look at this guy right here. And whites and blacks both protested together. Look at this guy's shirt.